Okay, good morning, everybody. We pick up at the top of 82A, and we continue to discuss. Can you hear? I'm not on mute, am I? I'm not on mute. Okay. We continue to discuss the mixing of bloods. I'm 82B at the top, third line. Shahai Rabbi Akiva Omer. So the Mishnah had said that if you have a Korban that is the avodah is supposed to be done with the blood on the outside mizbeach. If you bring it into the inside mizbeach, then it becomes pasul, it becomes invalid. But the rabbis say that that only applies to a chatas. Now, what's their reasoning? I'll review them Shmuel. Mashal Amad Dover Doma. Let's give an analogy, and this is a very strange analogy. I don't really understand what the Gemara is trying to say, but it's going to kind of move on to a different one anyway. What's this like? You have a student who's preparing wine for his teacher, and as you probably recall, the way wine was prepared was it was very strong and had to be watered down when you served it. So in this case, the student prepared the wine with hot water. So he had like a mulled cider kind of thing, mulled wine. V'yomer is ugly. And then the teacher wants more. He asks him, he says, pour me some more. And Rashi actually seems to say that which makes a little more sense with what the Gemara is saying. He says, pour me some more with some more hot wine. Amar lo b'meh, and the student says, "What kind of wine do you want, hot or cold?" Amar lo b'chamin no asukin. We're talking about hot water, right? The first one you gave me was hot water. I said, "Pour me hot water." Achshav bein b'chamin bein b'tzonin. Now, when I say, now this is what doesn't really, I don't really understand what the Gemara is getting at here, but it's saying when I said, "Pour me the water, pour me more wine," since we were talking about since like until now we've been using hot water. Now when I say pour me more, I mean either hot or cold. So this is what I don't really get. However, achaname. So here too. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's the same kind of thing. What we're talking about with the chatas inside or outside. Nichte. B'chatas askina. The Torah is talking about a chatas when it says v'yasi chatas the chatas because rachman alamali, and then when it continues to say. Like the Torah begins this paragraph, Zos Torah Sachatas. This is how you prepare a chatas, and then it gives you all the laws. So when it gives you the law about not taking it not taking the outside chatas into the inside, why does it why does it again use the word chatas? Elalav chatas kamin. So what it means is the same like the mashal with the wine, which I didn't really understand. But we're saying that when God is as if saying when I say chatas, when I say don't bring the chatas inside if it's supposed to be outside, I don't mean just chatas. I mean any kachim because we already know we were talking about chatas. So the Gemara doesn't like this analogy anyway. Maskif larafuna bereder of Yeshua. Michte, let's see. Yisrabu kol chodshim l'gabe mizbeach l'inyan marika ushtifa. When another law that the Torah tells us about chatas is that it has to be rinsed off. So why does it say chatas to cause rachman alonali? Why does it say rinse off the chatas? Or why does it say that the chatas about the outside blood coming into the heichal? Shmamina chatas in midiachrina lo. So that tells you that a chatas does become possible, but only a chatas becomes possible, like by being specific. Now this makes more sense to me, right? If the Torah says chatas, it's not trying to say anything; it's trying to say chatas, right? It's saying like by saying specifically in this clause about bringing it inside, that you shouldn't bring it inside. If it's supposed to be outside, you shouldn't bring a chatas inside. If it's supposed to be outside, it means specifically a chatas and not the other things. So I would say that the opposite of what the mashal was trying to say, which actually makes more sense to me, is that if the Torah specifies, it's telling you laws about karbanos and it's talking about chatas already, and it says, and don't bring the chatas inside, means don't bring only the chatas inside. Don't apply it to other karbanos. So you want an analogy to somebody pouring wine. It's like if you're pouring wine, you're mixing wine with hot water, mixing wine with hot water, with cold water for different people, or like one after another for the same person, Amarlo. And then the teacher says, Al tim zogli elachamin. You know what I want? This time, bring me some hot wine. Okay, so he means hot wine, not cold wine. Ella, so we can't use this as a source for Rabbi Akiva, who says that any this applies to any carbon, that you can't bring the outside blood into the inside mizbeach. So we need another reason for Rabbi Akiva. Talmud Rabbi Akiva mechatos v'chol chatos. Rabbi Akiva sees an extra word here. Kol chatas asher yuva midama al kodesh pnima. Any chatas which is brought inside, where it's supposed to be outside. What's the so we see where this is going, but the Tanya, here's the brisa. Chatos ein li ala chatos. The brisa is talking about our case where you don't bring outside blood and outside chatos into the inside the hechal. Ein li ala chatos, and maybe that only applies to chatos. Kadshe kadashim nayin. What about other karbanos that are kadshe kadashim? Talmomar kol chatos, any chatos. The extra word any. Um, applies to the other Kadshe Kadashim aside from Chatas. Kachim Kalim Minaim, what about Kachim Kalim, the less strict or less holy sacrifices? Talmud Lomar, Vichol Chatas, the extra Vav, and any Chatas. So you've included all other karbanos in this law, according to Rabbi Akiva, of don't bring the outside into the inside. Rabbi Yossi Glili objects. I'm not listening to any of this. These extra, you're adding on extra things, extra cases into this law with your extra words. I'm not buying it. Ella, this is how to explain it. Chatos en liela chatos yachid. What's the like? In other words, he's saying like I understand it says the next word call, but you're adding the wrong thing. The original applies to a chatas yachid, an individual's chatas. Chatas sibur minayin. How do I know to include in this law of don't bring the outside into the inside? How do I know to apply it to a public, a communal chatas? We're kol chatas. That's what I use the word kol for. Chatas zachar. Now, and maybe it's only talking about a male chatas. How do I know chatas nekeva minayin? How would I include a female chatas? That's what you have the vav. So the Gemara says, wait a second, klape laya. Like, is that how you figure it? Like, it doesn't make sense because what the Gemara is objecting here, apparently, as we'll see from the answer, is what is the sex of most chatos? Almost every chatos is a female chatos. Almost everyone is female. Okay, so you're saying like, oh, I'm going to assume the chatas means a male chatas. No, that doesn't make sense. Chatas should mean a female chatas because that's what most of them are. And if you want to exclude the rare case of a male chatas, that's how you should include with the vav. So actually, that's where the Gemara goes. This is what it means to say. Eli chatas nekeva. From kol chatas, I would say any female chatas the law applies to. Chatas zachar mina. And what about the exceptional case of the male chatas? How do I know that it applies to that as well? V'chol chatas. That's what you have the vav for. Okay, that makes more sense. So again, like this whole line of reasoning here, like the assumptions are kind of strange, but the conclusions make sense to me anyway. The suburb of Yossi Glili High Krola Hachi Diasa. Now the Gemara is just cleaning up here and saying, really, is that what Rav Yossi holds that you include the chatas sibur and the female and the male chatas in the law of inside and outside? Vatanya, wait, we have another brayso. Rav Yossi Glili Omer. Kol ha'inyan kulo ena medaber el b'parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim. This whole paragraph, this whole subject is about bulls that are burned on the mizbeach and male goats that are burned on the mizbeach. Lisraf pisuleyan abeis habira. What it's talking about is burn them in the beis habira, which apparently means. In the Beis Habira, which is in part of the Azara. The note explains here that what do you do with the chatas? You usually burn it outside bichutz lamachne, outside the mikdash. But if it becomes invalid, then it's burned in the azara. So and also to give you a lav not to eat it if it's once it's burned or even before it's burned, not to eat it. Armulo. So the rabbi said to him, "Chatos shenichnas damav lifnai v'lifnim minayin." Um, a chatos that the blood, which was supposed to stay outside and came inside the azara. How do you know that that's possible? Amar lahem hein lo huva. From the story of Aaron and Nadav and Avihu, the death of Nadav and Avihu, it says, "Hein lehuva stam el hakodesh pnima." It implies that, because it was not invalidated by the blood being brought in, you should have eaten it, right? Implying that if it had been brought inside, then you shouldn't eat it, right? So that is, so if this is what Rabbi Yossi Glili says, um, then this whole chapter is not talking about what we think it's talking about, right? What we said that Rabbi Yossi Glili said it's talking about. So Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva Kamar. He's arguing with Rabbi Akiva. He says, "Look, I don't agree with you, Rabbi Akiva. That this chapter is talking at all about bringing the outside blood inside, but you think it is. Even if you think it is, even according to you, you could read it differently. You don't have to read it as you do." About which kinds of chatas to include or exclude. There's a different way you can explain it, so that it's a challenge to Rabbi Akiva, even though Rabbi Yossi doesn't buy the whole premise of Rabbi Akiva in the first place. Okay,
How does he understand this section, these verses in
which
the
ones?
Torah then? What about lo huva? Hein lo
Oh,
huva.
Halo Hufa, he says this is the source. Like Rabbi Akiva, you think the source of the psul of bringing the outside blood inside is from the chapter we've been discussing about chatas, right? But I don't think so.
Zot chata, right?
Yeah, right. So that's where you derive it from, but I don't even think that's where you should derive it from. I derive it from the story of Nadav and Avihu because it's stated there that you should have eaten the carbon because it didn't become possible from being brought inside the Azara, right? Implying that had it been brought inside the Azara, it would have been possible. That's where Rabbi Yossi Aglili gets it from that story.
When they did not bring it inside the Azara, or they did
Right,
not bring it inside the
right.
Heichal.
It
I mean,
says like you should have eaten it because it didn't become possible by bringing it inside the Azara, implying that if you had brought it inside the Azara, it would have been possible.
right.
Yeah. Next Mishnah. Chatas shekibel doma b'shnei kasas. You have a chatas that you've got 2 cups of blood from the chatas. Now, and then different things occur to them. So you've got the blood from one chatas split into 2 cups. If one of them was taken outside of the Azara, Hafnimi Kasher, the inside one is still valid. Nichnas echad mehem lifnim, and if one of them was brought from inside the Azara, inside the Heichal, inside the Heichal, which also validates the blood. So, but what's the status of the one that was left in its proper place? Rabbi Yossi Lili Machshir Bachitzon. Rabbi Yossi Lili said, okay, the one that you took inside, the blood is puzzle, but the one that stayed outside is still valid chatas blood. In other words, the fact that some of the blood was invalidated doesn't affect the status of the blood that was fine. Of a chachamim poslim, but the rabbis say differently. The rabbi said once part of the blood has been made possible, all of the blood of this carbon is possible. So Rabbi Yossi Glili says what you're saying, chachamim, is not logical. You want to say that everything is possible, but regarding the place about which your machshava makes it possible. In other words, bachutz. If you think about uh, if you think about doing the avoda bachutz outside the right place, lo asa samashir kayotze. That which, like, if it's a case of pigul, you're not saying there's a problem, right? You're saying that, yeah, you took some of the blood out, or I'm sorry. You thought about taking some of the blood out. Lo asa samashuyar kayotse. That which, um, one second. Okay. Okay. So if you're talking about chutzlim komo, if you have a thought about chutzlim komo, that something can become pigul by a thought of later I'm going to take it outside. I'm going to do the avoda outside, right?
No, we learn that's not the case. We learn it's only chutz lismano, chutz makomo. It is
No, but
makabi
it's still puzzle. It's may not
puzzle,
be correct, but it's still puzzle.
but it's
Okay,
still
yeah, okay, all right, fine. So I use the term pigul, maybe not exactly. So okay, you're right. But the thought of chutzlim komo makes it possible, right? So lo asa some shir kayose, but um, but that is and yet if you actually take half the blood outside to bachutz, right? Then the inside, the blood that you didn't take outside is still fine. Now, makom she'ein hamachshava pasalos. What if your thought was not that I'm going to do the avoda outside, that I'm going to take the blood outside the mikdash. I'm going to take it inside to the azara, right? Now, you can't actually take it into the azara. That would make it possible. But if you just think I'm going to take it into the azara, that does not make it possible. That's not chutzlim komo. Right, that's not a machshava chutzlim kama. So about the inside, it's not so bad to think that I'm going to take the blood inside, right? So then, if you actually take the blood inside, so it shouldn't be worse than taking the blood outside, and it shouldn't invalidate the blood that stayed where it was. Um, okay, so that seems to be the Mishnah has no
well, if you
retort.
actually take the blood outside, then it is chutz makomo, right?
If
Why
you
would it?
actually take the blood outside, yes. But what happens to the other half of the blood that you left inside? Everybody agreed, not a problem.
Right, that would be okay.
Right. So now when we're dealing about taking it inside, right, where it's not so bad. Inside is not so bad because how do I know inside is not so bad? Because if I had a Pegel-like thought, if I thought about, oh, I'm going to later take it inside, that wouldn't make it puzzle, right? That's not chutzlim koma. That's not considered chutzlim koma. So it's not so bad to, considering the inside is not so bad. So certainly if I actually take some of the blood inside and leave some of it in the azara, then that blood should also be good, right? Because the blood, if a case of half the blood actually going outside the mikdash doesn't cause a problem for the blood that remained inside, then a case of the blood going inside the heichal shouldn't be a problem for the blood that remained in the azara. Now, nichnas l'chaper.
Is he
What
allowed to
happens?
take it inside? Didn't we discuss this before that it one isn't if it's not supposed to go inside, it's not allowed to take it inside. I mean, I'm then
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
into
yeah. But we're talking about, remember, we're talking about a unique case here. We're not where there's two cups of blood from the same carbon, half and half, right? But they're both from the same carbon. What happens if you take half of the blood and invalidate it? What happens to so the one that you took that you invalidated is invalid, is puzzle. But what about the blood that nothing happened to? It was sitting here the whole time waiting for somebody to do the avoda. Nobody took it inside, nobody took it outside. It's fine, right? Does it get invalidated by the fact that you made the other half puzzle? That's what we're talking about.
so that he would be
So
allowed to
yes,
bring
so
inside.
absolutely, you're not supposed to take the one cup that you took inside the heichal. You weren't supposed to do that, and in fact, that blood becomes puzzle. But the Mishnah is talking about what is the status of the blood that you did not do that to, the other cup of blood that stayed where it was supposed to stay. Does that also become invalidated by your making the other half of the blood puzzle?
So this is one cup that was
One cup,
supposed.
no problem. Nothing problematic happened to this one cup. But because blood from that same carbon had a problem, other blood from that same carbon had a problem, that's why we're discussing, is there a problem now with the good blood?
So that blood one is allowed to take inside. That's what we're
So that's
saying.
what the machlokas. No, but you're not allowed to take it inside. Is it still, can you still do the avoda with it? It's still in the azara where it's supposed to be, and waiting to go on the mizbeach
Oh,
achitza.
oh, okay,
Can you continue or not?
okay.
Yeah. Um, okay, next thing in the Mishnah, nichnas l'chaper. If you brought in the blood into the heichal, which you weren't supposed to do, and you intended to put it on the inner mizbeach, afal pishalo, keep her puzzle. Doesn't matter if you actually did it or not. Once you brought it inside into the wrong place, it's puzzle. Dear Rabbi Lazar, that's what Rabbi Lazar said. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Achi Chaper. No, it only becomes invalidated if you bring it into the heichal and you apply it to the mizbeach. You do the avoda in the heichal. That's what makes it possible. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im hichlich shogeg kasher. Rabbi Yehuda says, and also presumably following Rabbi Eliezer, it's like if you it's bad. It makes it possible just to bring it inside the heichal, even if you didn't actually do the avodah in the heichal. But Rabbi Yehuda adds, you know what? If you did it accidentally, that doesn't invalidate it either, right? It's only if you purposely took it into the heichal that right away, when it comes into the heichal, it becomes possible. But Rabbi Yehuda says, if you did it accidentally, then it doesn't make it possible. You can bring it back out and still use it. Kol domim psulim, any invalid blood shenitnu al gabi mizbeach that are put on the mizbeach lo hirtza hatzitz. The tzitz doesn't help. So what's the tzitz was one of the big day kahuna, the plate that the golden plate that the Kohen Gadol wore around his forehead, and the purpose of the tzitz was lechaper, to atone for any carbon that was brought in an invalid way. But the Mishnah is saying Elul Tami that only applies to things that were done betuma, but not all these other things. Shatzitz maras al atame, ve'en maras al yotze. The tzitz was atoned for if you brought something tame to the mikdash, that's what the tzitz was atoned for, but not for other ways that you can invalidate the carbon, like if you took it outside of the mikdash altogether. That the tzitz didn't help for. Now, what does help for it? It doesn't seem like there is anything that helps for it. Anyway, Tanya, Amar Yossi Aglili. Yossi Aglili says, Kal v'chomer. Uma b'malkom shemach shava poselas. Bachutz. Lo pasal dam shabachutz es shabifnim. So about the outside the mikdash, outside the azara, where thinking that you're going to do it makes it invalid in a pigul-like way, right? Lo pasal dam shabachutz es shabifnim. The blood that you did that with, the half that you did that with, doesn't affect the blood that stayed in the right place. So that's about the going outside. Makom she'ena machshava poselos bifnim enadin shalo yifsal dam shebifnim esachutz. This is what we saw in the Mishnah, right? That inside, where it's not even a Pegel-like problem, the inside is not a Pegel-related thing, so it should certainly, blood that is brought in there should not invalidate the other half of the blood that stayed where it was. We're low, so now we're continuing the conversation. The rabbi said, Hari Omer, Asher Yuva Midama. Um, uh, we're talking about Pigul and the Pigul like Chutzlim Como, where it says a carbon that the if the sorry, not Pigul, but uh, the Isur of and the Psul of bringing blood in outside blood inside. Afilu miktsas dama. So the rabbis imply from the pasuk asher yuva midama, from its blood, right? Meaning even part of the blood. So it implies that exactly our case, right? If only half the blood was invalidly brought inside the heichal, that sounds like it's implying that all of the blood, even the blood that stayed in its right place, still becomes possible. So Amalam seems like a reasonable conclusion.
Like like when we talk mitzvah hayom, we call mitzvah mixats hayom kekulu hayom.
Well, I
Not
mean,
exactly. I know,
that's a
but it's
yeah, that's a principle. But here it's like they're doing the same thing, but from a pasuk, like the
right.
actual pasuk applies. Yeah, but yes, same. Okay, I'll buy that. Amalahem. So Rabbi Yossi responds, Kal v'chomer leyotze me'ata. So. Um, you can make if you're going to make that we can make this kal v'chomer for any blood that that goes outside. Uma b'makom she'ein machshava poselas bifnim. If you think about the inside, taking something inside where there's no pigul like problem. Postel dam shenif bifnim es shabachutz. The inside blood that you brought inside can make the blood that's still outside possible. So makom shemachshava poselas bachutz. And now, if you think about the outside, where you do have a pigul-like situation, and odin sheifsol dam shebachutz eshabifnim, so the outside blood should certainly make it possible. So Amar Lo. So the answer, Hari Omer Asher Yuva. Blood that Asher Yuva Midama, that will be brought, right? Brought into the wrong place. Hanichnas posel, vein hayotze posel. Now, when the Torah says what is a psul, it says if you bring something inside that shouldn't be brought inside. So it's specifically talking about that, about bringing something inside, not taking something outside. Um, so so the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. "Tei machshava bifnim paselos mikal v'chomer." Wait, I can do a kal v'chomer from the inside to the outside, from the inside case to the outside case. Umav makom she'lo pasal dam shebachutz shebifnim, the outside, the chutz, which is a place where the outside, by bringing half the blood outside, doesn't invalidate the inside blood. Machshava poselos b'chutz. So, if you start from that premise, and then you would say, well, then what kind of Pegel-like thought would be invalidating? Um, Maybe you should apply the kal vachomer, that not only a thought, a Pegel-like thought about taking it outside is bad. That implies by kal vachomer taking it, a thought about taking it inside is also bad. Also makes it possible, and yet that's not the case. We know that the Torah tells us. Um, but the Torah says by Yom HaShlishi. Um,
Well, but don't
um,
we say that? Don't we? But we say if you bring the blood inside, it shouldn't be inside. It is puzzle, right? So how
I'm
can
sorry,
we?
say again.
If we bring blood from the outside, that should be outside, and you bring it inside, it's puzzle then, right? Pasul. So how can we? Well, where's this Kol Homer? The Kol Homer seems to suggest it would not be.
The Kal Vachomer is examining, like if you fall, if you're going to accept this type of Kal Vachomer, then what you're saying is that if you that understand, we can derive the rules of the inside from the rules of the outside, right? So the rules of the outside are um, are more lenient. Um, so and the rules of the inside are more strict when it comes to moving the blood, right? So maybe you should say the same thing about machshava, a pigul type machshava, right? That just as thinking that you're going to do something outside is bad, so certainly thinking that you're going to do something inside is bad, right? Like in the heichal, right? But and yet we know that's not the case, right? But this type of kal vachomer would lead you to believe that thinking about doing the avoda that's supposed to be done outside, or not, yeah, like in the azara, thinking that you're going to do it in the heichal, that should be a problem, right? But we know that it's not a problem. Harei Omer, because the Torah says by Yom Hashlishi. You may recall that in the rules, like how did we get to chutzlim komo as a pigul-like thing in the first place? Because the Torah only talks about chutzli zmano as pigul, but it says by Yom Hashlishi. And the Gemara had derived from that makom shemishulosh b'dam b'basar beimurim, a place that has thinking about taking to a triply bad place, a place that has a threefold function for blood, for meat, and for burning the emurim. So. Um, so that's how we know from this pasuk in the Torah that thinking of chutzlim komo only applies to outside, further outside than it should be, not to further inside, which shows you that the kal vachomer that you're trying to build is negated by the Torah rule. So
but it's still chutza makomo, right?
yes, that's correct. That's correct. But the only thing we're doing here is saying, well, wait a minute, which is still chutzlim komo?
No, if you have it outside and you say, I think I'm going to do it inside, so that's
That's
chutza
not a
makomo.
pigul problem. That's not a
No,
pigul
it's
problem.
not pigo, but why is it not puzzle?
It's because I mean, when I say it's not a Pegel problem, it's not even puzzle from that machshava Pegel type perspective.
Not even puzzle. But we learned all along that chutza makomo is puzzle.
But now we're talking about machshava, right? So I am definitely not allowed to actually do it, to actually
Right.
bring the blood into the heichal. But if I think about bringing the blood into the heichal, not a problem.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Um, The Gemara is not still not done. Velote machshava poselos b'chutz mikal v'chomer. Shouldn't the thought of poselos b'chutz mikal v'chomer? You could say that you could say that there's a kal v'chomer as follows, that to prove that thinking about doing the avoda outside the azara is it should be okay. Why? From this kal v'chomer. I mean, we know it's not okay, right? The Torah tells us it's not okay, but we should be able to use this. Why don't we use this kal v'chomer? As follows: Uma makom shepasal dam shebifnim shebachutz, the place, like the inside place, the inside the heichal, um, where if you actually bring blood in there makes the outside blood puzzle. Ein machshava paselos bifnim, but thinking about doing it doesn't make it puzzle. So makom shalom pasal dam shabachusa shebifnim. So what about a place like outside of the azara, where if you actually take it outside, that doesn't affect the blood that you left inside. So ein adin shlo yeh pasal machshava b'chutz. So certainly that shouldn't, just thinking about taking it outside shouldn't make it puzzle in a pigul like way, and yet we know that it does. So Talmud lo bar shlishi chutz lizmana pigul chutz lim kamo. That's why the Torah tells. So, but the Torah actually tells you no, don't go with this kal v'chomer. It may seem like a perfectly logical kal v'chomer, but the Torah is telling you that by saying bayom shlishi refers to chutz lizmano, and pigul is chutz limkomo. So, in other words, just don't use these kal v'chomers at all, and that's why the whole argument falls apart. The whole argument from these kal v'chomers falls apart because the Torah explicitly rules them out.
Well, is one allowed to take blood from the inside to the outside?
Um, no,
I didn't think so. So where's the basis for the
but
kal
does it make
vachomer?
it possible? No, but there is no basis for the kal vachomer. In other words, yeah, there is no basis for the kal vachomer from the actual law because the Torah. What we're saying here is that these kal vachomers might be in fact logical, but what am I going to do? The Torah is telling me explicitly, you know, this is the law. Don't try to figure it out from logic. Right? You can't use logic in this place because the Torah sets out the rules. The rules don't follow this kal vachomer logic. Therefore, that tells me this is not the kind of kal vachomer that you can apply.
But I don't. Well, what's even the basis for it? If we're not allowed, it says shelo paso dam b'chutz. What's that? Shebachutz et bifnim. What's it? Eno dem yehi paso machshava b'chutz. Isn't it? Doesn't it? Don't want to say ein machshava paso bifnim that
What we're trying to do here is figure out which is the kal and which is the chamor. Okay,
right?
and it turns out that if you look at the actual laws, you actually can't see a pattern. Right? You can't see which is kal and which is chamor. Or if you can, it is contradicted by the Torah.
Um,
So generally
that's what I understand.
speaking,
That
we're
blood
free
that's
to apply.
inside you can't bring outside, right? And blood's outside you can't bring inside, right?
Right.
both in both situations.
Um,
Isn't that correct?
okay.
If
Right.
that's correct, then how do they even think we can develop a kol vachomer saying if you think that we can bring it outside, then the machshava should also be good. I mean, where's the basis to establish this? God, even mention this kol vachomer.
Well, I think you weren't following the Kal Vachomer, and it is very confusing to express because you get mixed up in thinking about and actually doing, right? But I think maybe think about it this way: the rules of machshava, right, of pigul like machshava, indicate that outside is more chamor, right? But the rules of actually moving the blood from one domain to another indicate that the inside is more chamor. Okay, so that's where it all gets mixed up, right? It's like, and the Torah is telling you don't try to figure out a hierarchy here of which is more chomer, which is less chomer. The Torah is telling you this is the way it is, right? Regarding machshava, it goes this way. Regarding where you're allowed to, or what makes it possible, it goes this way. They're just different kind of subject areas, and you can't apply logically rules from one to the other. Does that make more sense?
In a general sense, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's as good as we're going to get. All right. Now, moving on. Basar hayotzi lechutz pasol. What about meat? Now we've been talking about blood. What about meat that goes outside, outside where it's supposed to be? Pasol. That's invalid. As we'll see in a minute. We'll see the source for that in a minute. Anichnas lifnim kasher, and if it goes inside, like it's not supposed to go inside, but it does, that doesn't invalidate it. It's still kasher. Sheyehei bedin shapasel. Logically, we should say that it should be pasul when it goes inside the heichal, as follows from a kal vachomer. Ma b'makom shelo pasal dam shabachutza shabifnim. Again, the Pegel argument, right, or the Pegel-like argument. If a place which is bachutz, where the blood doesn't make it possible, doesn't make the blood that goes out doesn't make the inside blood possible. The half that hasn't moved, basar yosei lachutz possible. But meat that goes b'chutz goes outside is possible. Malcolm shapasul. So uh, sorry. So the blood that stays inside doesn't get puzzled. So meat that goes outside, but meat that goes outside, we know does become puzzle. Now what about bifnim? How are we going to apply that to bifnim? Makom shapasal dam shebifnim as shebachutz. In the taking the blood improperly into the heichal, which does invalidate that blood which was left in its proper place. So it's more chamor. So basar anichnas bifnim ein odin she'ifsal. So the inside is more chamor. So certainly the meat, if the meat that is brought outside is puzzle, certainly the meat that is brought inside should become puzzle because it's more chamor. So we answer Harei Omer midama dama v'lo basar. But the rule in the Torah says Asher yuva midama pnima. If the blood was brought inside, it's not even talking about the meat. So like what do you bring why are you applying this rule to the meat at all? The rule is established about the blood. So kal v'chomer me'ata, so we should now make the following kal v'chomer. Uma b'makom shepasol dam shebifnim es shebachutz. The inside case where bringing the blood in invalidates the blood that was left in the right place, so it's chamor basar nichnas lifnim kasher, and yet meat that you take inside the heichal when you weren't supposed to. That doesn't invalidate it. It's still the meat is still fine. Now, so try to apply this to the outside. Makom shalo pasal dam shabachutza shabifnim. The outside, the azara, where the taking half of the blood outside does not negatively affect the blood that was left inside. So it's a kal place. Basar yosel lechutz and adin shekasher. So certainly meat that goes outside the azara should be kosher. And yet it's not so. Harei Omer, ubasar basadat treifa lo tochelu. But the Torah says, nevela meat you can't eat, right? Kevan sheyasa basar chutz lemechitzaso nasar. We're applying this in an unusual way when by saying ubasar basadeh trefa, right? Meat out in the field. So by saying that. Um, this is meat that's like outside of its place. Really, meat where you're supposed to get it from the butcher, right? From the kosher, from the shochet. You're supposed to get it. Go to the glot shop, and supposed to get your meat there. If you find meat outside of the right place, that's where it's possible. That's where it's trade in this case. So we apply the same thing to kachim. That if the meat is taken outside of its place, outside of the yazara, it is possible.
But that's sort
Um,
of a stretch
yeah,
there
there's a
because
stretch.
we brought
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely. It's a
meat
bit of a
was
stretch.
inside. It was
Yeah,
kosher. We
yeah.
shechted it, and now he's bringing it outside. Why? How do you compare that to a treifa that's found in the field?
Okay. They're taking it in a very narrow sense, right? This meat that was found in the field is outside of the place, is where it should be, outside of the butcher shop. Um, so similarly, meat that was taken outside of its place, outside of the mikdash, is also invalid. It's pretty narrow interpretation, but yeah, I see your objection. Tanarabana, Panima. Um, so going back, this is going back, I think, to the Nadav and Avihu story, right, where we derive since the blood was not taken. Since the blood was not invalidated by being taken inside the heichal, it's fine. Ainli el pnima heichal minayin. What about so the this is a um, so maybe Pnima should mean the Kodesh HaKodashim, right? Remember, there's three levels. There's the Azara, the Heichal, and the Kodesh HaKodashim, all ascending levels of holiness, right? So when the Torah says Pnima, that it's not a problem because the blood was not taken all the way inside, right? Maybe inside means into the Kodesh Kodashim. How do I know that actually means even only taken as far as the Azara? Sorry, even taken as far as the Heichal, Talmud Lomar, Ela Kodesh Penima. It says Ela Kodesh Penima, to the holy inside. So the Heichal is considered holy as well. So therefore, Penima is understood to mean it would be a problem even if we're only brought as far as the Heichal. That's still a more holy place than it's supposed to be. V'yomar Kodesh. So V'al Yomar Pnima. So wait, why doesn't it just say Hein Lohuva Esdama El HaKodesh? Why does it also say Pnima? Doesn't that imply the Kodesh HaKodashim? Amarava Bazev Limit El Zeb. One term illuminates the other, right? Mina Dava Tosha V'Sacher. Here's a similar case where we have so what we're getting at is if it had only said Kodesh, um, I would have thought maybe that means um, one second. If it only said Panima. If it only used one term, Kodesh or Panima, I might have thought that meant the Kodesh HaKodashim. By using both terms and specifying that, either the Kodesh or the Panim, right? That implies, or that tells you, by using both terms, it says, yeah, even if it only goes as far as the Heichal, it's still a problem. And we have a similar
Well, what is the
situation.
pasuk exactly? Does the pasuk use both terms?
Yeah,
I mean,
El HaKodesh
Zohuba El
Panima.
Panima,
El
right?
HaKodesh, El HaKodesh Panima uses both terms.
I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, and similarly, Tosha B'Sachir. What's that talking about? Can an eved of a kohen eat truma? Right. So the answer, an eved kanani. So we didn't have a toshav v'sachir. Let's see what the pasuk says about that. The Tanya toshav ze kinya konoi kinyan olam. Who toshav v'sachir lo yochal kodesh. They can't eat it. Right. So what's a toshav? Somebody who's owned forever, right? This is not Kanani, sorry. Somebody who's a nirtza, right? Who has has his earlobe drilled to remain a slave forever. And
So it's an
Sachir is
Eved
like
Ivri
Konakini
then.
and Shanim. What?
An Eved Ivri, not an Eved Kanani, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yes, Evid Ivri. Um, so and Sachir is Ekone Kinyan Shanim, and the term Sachir refers to somebody who's only there for up to 6 years, right? Doesn't have the permanent the earlobe thing. Um, so Bryce says Yomar Toshav El Yomar Sacher. What do you need to tell us both? Tell us just about the more strict one, right? Vani Omer Koni Kinyan Olam Eno Ochel. Kona kinyan shaneim lo kol shekain. So if someone who's permanently the Cohen's, which you would think is more like part of the Cohen's property or family or whatever, so certainly a temporary slave, if he can't eat, so certainly a temporary slave who's less connected to the Kohen certainly can't eat, right? Why don't you only have the one term? Elokain, because if so, or Toshav Zekioni Kinyan Shem, because I don't know, like Toshav and Sachir, if I only had said one of those, I wouldn't know which one it's referring to, right? I would have said, oh, it must be referring to the one that is less like the Kohen's family. So by saying both, therefore, let's say both. By using both terms, it tells you that one is talking about the permanent slave, and the other is talking about the temporary slave. Neither one of them can eat truma. Let's see. Wait, I'm just going for a few more minutes if it's okay with everybody. Amalei Abaye says Bishlam Hasam Tregufeninu. Oh, okay. So you're talking about Toshav, about the two different types of slaves. We're talking about two different people, right? It could have said specifically. It didn't have to use the terms Toshav or Sacher. It could have said Nirtza, right? The person, the case where the guy has his ear pierced. That's what I want to say is not can't eat the truma. V'idach asu b'kal v'chomer, and then I would learn the other one from kal v'chomer. Milsa asu b'kal v'chomer tarach l'kasel l'kra. But the Torah went ahead and it could have done that, but instead it uses these two terms. Al-hacha kevan de ifsal b'heichal. Since it becomes possible in our case, you're talking about the same blood, right? The same entity, but just two different cases that could happen to it. Kevin the Yisrael behechal lifnai lifnim my bite. Like if it's already like there's a hierarchy here, right? Once you bring it into the heichal, it becomes possible. So you have to tell me that then you then bring it into the kodesh and kodashim. It's possible. It's already possible, right? Alamarava, call me to the chashiv alei lifnai v'lifnim lo mifsal beheichal. Anything that becomes that. The chashiv alei lifnai v'lifnim, anything that you thought about bringing into the kodesh kodashim doesn't become possible by bringing it into the heichal. Only if you actually bring it into the kodesh kodashim, that's how he learns this the Ela Kodesh Panima. It's like a different rule, a bit of an obscure one, but it could be the pasuk could be talking about when the Kohen took the blood into the Heichal with the intent of continuing into the Kodesh HaKodashim. Then it only becomes invalid once he gets to his intended place. Once he gets to the Kodesh HaKodashim, and it's not yet invalid by being brought into the Heichal. It's a pretty weird case. But
So then
that's
they could
Rabbi
use it
explanation.
then? I mean, it's not invalid, it's not possible.
Yeah, it's a little weird case. Yes, that's what he's saying. Okay, I think we're gonna have to call it here for today and pick it up here. I guess I'll let Ellie know to pick it up here from Bayrava.
Sure.
11. Okay, so I hope that all made sense. It's a little hard to put into words because these cases are all so similar, but I think we managed. Okay, good job, everybody. See you next week.
Good job.